Welcome to Let's Get Metaphysical, the show that stretches you beyond your five senses. When you are looking for your next step on the path into the unseen, we've got you covered. Join epic adventure seekers and level up your game with your host, reality magician Allie Bierman.
Greetings, epic adventure seekers. Welcome to your guide to demystifying your world. I'm Allie Bierman, and you are listening to Let's Get Metaphysical, connecting heart and mind. If you've not yet done so, please rate and review our show. A quick note about what you like and who you think would like it really helps others find us. I super appreciate your helping to get the word out. Today's review comes from Crystalia Marie, who says, powerful and insightful. Allie has a unique and beautiful way of bringing out insights and wisdom of her own as well as her guests. If you're a metaphysics skeptic, this is a place for you to learn and discover the power of your minds, power of your connection to your divine source, and your ability to do much more than you are ever taught in school. Brilliant show, which I highly recommend. Thank you, Crystalia. Today's guest, Anne-Marie Marron, is an expert on rewilding ourselves while dismantling domestication by raising consciousness. Before we jump in with her, I'm going to take a minute to tell you about the special gift I made just for you. Seriously, I really did create this guide for you, my epic adventure seeker, as you dive into new realms, opening your life to new and different experiences. If you think life just happens to you, that you have no say in the matter, then now is the time to discover your true power and your true control every day in your life. If you continue walking the same path you've always walked, guess what? You'll keep arriving at the same old destination. It's time to forge a new path, to go places you've never been, and to explore a world you've yet to know. My guide, Step in a New Direction, gently grants you a new passage in life. The link to download your copy is in the show notes. Anne-Marie Marron walks side by side with thought leaders and revolutionaries. She guides those who have experienced an awakening and now seek the integration of mind, heart, and ground. She helps clients to reclaim their power in all areas of life through a process of dismantling the trappings of social and cultural conditioning, as well as unresolved trauma. Anne-Marie helps people tap into their inner wisdom, clarity, and confidence. This includes identifying and befriending exiled and reactive parts of self that were constructed as children to protect and defend against threats, but no longer serve the adult. In addition to her one-on-one coaching, podcast, and group programs, she consults with businesses and executives about how to transform their cultures from systems of power over to power with. I subscribe to her podcast, Power Reclamation, and I encourage you to do the same. And I now welcome you to our show. I'm so excited to jump into all this cool stuff with you.
Thanks, Allie. It's really good to be here.
So when I work on people who live in their heads, which anybody in a corporate situation definitely lives in their heads, and most jobs people have to live in their heads, they're not in their bodies. I have very sensitive hands and I feel the energy and it literally stops at their neck. And I have to teach them and help them to breathe their whole being into their body. And it's extraordinary when it finally makes it through the body, because it's like the bottom of the feet opening up and it goes shooting out. It's very powerful. And I'm imagining that you experience something similar just from your wording, and you talk about your embodied leadership path. Is that something that's like what I was talking about?
Yes, and I agree with you. I think there can be such a movement away from feeling and noticing what's happening in our body when we're taught to just problem solve and fix and think of, we're thinking solutions. And I know for myself, I was one of those people. And I remember decades ago when I was in my first coaching program, I got feedback from the teachers, like, you need to get more in your body. And I literally didn't know what it meant. I was an athlete. I was a hardcore athlete, and I was in my body every day. I'm like, I'm in my body. What are you talking about? But what was so amazing was that was probably some of the hardest feedback I had, because I didn't quite know what to do with it. And yet it took me on this incredible journey where I started studying somatic meditation, so body-based meditation, and learning how really ultimately it took me on a path of healing trauma. Because what the reason that I wasn't feeling my body is it hadn't felt safe to take up all that space. It hadn't felt safe to root into the ground. What felt safer was being hyper vigilant and looking for where there might be threats and just staying in my mind a lot. So I do now, when I work with leaders, my invitation is exactly what you were describing, of just how can they use the brilliance of their mind, but also access sensations and heart intelligence and gut feelings to know more of what is intuitively trying to come through than just logic and reason.
It's extraordinary. I've never worked with an athlete, so I never thought about that. I know when I work with people, because I'm looking at organ systems which are connected to particular muscles. And if certain muscles aren't working at 100%, well, you can have one that's turned on and its pairing muscle is turned off. And that's what allows athletes to get injuries. And if nobody's working with them, either in my energetic way or your way, I think that accounts for a whole lot of athletic injuries and shortened careers.
Completely. I mean, what you're describing, Allie, is exactly why I stopped being an athlete, because I hit a wall with an injury that I couldn't get through until I started doing more personal work and understanding my beliefs and like what was really keeping my body contracted in certain ways and protecting in other ways. And so without a guide, unless we've been taught that as a child, which most schools don't, it's really important to find people like you or me who hold a vision of being more integrated and whole, and the intelligence there.
And it's the doctors and the trainers, they don't know this stuff.
I know.
Some years ago, when I think it was a foot problem, the foot doctor I went to see, I lived near George Mason University, and my foot doctor was the trainer for their athletic program. And he told me I had one short leg. I didn't have a short leg. I had a misaligned atlas. When your atlas is misaligned, one shoulder goes up, one hip goes down, and it looks like you have a short leg that you don't have. So if he's working with an athlete and he tells them they have a short leg and he's putting in some kind of orthotic, it's like, I don't even want to think about how that's going to destroy the person's well-being.
Exactly. And that's, I think, what, before we just started the show, we had a brief discussion just about the integrating the wholeness of who we are. And if we can't look at that structurally and realize that if your atlas and cervical spine is off, that there's something else in your body that's off. It's like, how can we learn as a medical system, as a society, as individuals, to really investigate what's happening at the whole system level, rather than just hit the symptom? I think that's what you're really speaking about. It's like there's a cost to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I know I was working on someone one day, and I never let anybody leave me, well, in my kinesiology practice, unless 100% of their systems are on at 100% at that time. Doesn't mean they're going to hold, because they need to come back for my protocol. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get one of her muscles on, and that never happened to me before. And I asked Spirit for guidance and got the message, she's got to go get her atlas adjusted. And when she went and got her atlas adjusted, she had this heart condition where her heart would race, and she'd go to the ER and they'd have to stop her heart. That was the only thing that would slow it down, and then restart it. After she got that atlas adjustment, she went years without having that problem. She also had sleep apnea, and the atlas adjustment, she didn't have sleep apnea anymore. It's just something so basic that people just don't understand your body's responding to your emotions, and it's responding. So I love the way you take all of those aspects into account when you're working with somebody.
I do, just like you. I can't, because of my own journey, I have learned that if you just try to isolate one component, you're missing actually a lot of the wisdom that's trying to come through to, help heal. Like, let's use that example. So she has this heart condition. They have to stop her heart, but once her atlas gets released, there's a whole other experience happening where her body her heart isn't needing to speed up anymore. And I think it's similar, no matter what we're talking about in our life, whether it's how you want to, the strategic vision of a business. Are you thinking about the impact? Are you touching all the parts? Or the body? It's all the same. Like how expanded can we go to include all the parts so that we can accelerate and innovate more quickly, whether that's healing in our body or something external in the world.
That's incredible, of course. Yeah, one of the books I use for reference is by Annette Noontil, she was Australian, and she takes Louise Hay's This Body Thing is reflecting such and such emotion. She takes it to such an extraordinarily detailed level. It's like, this tooth means that on the right side, on the left side, this joint in the finger. And she also has a section on, if this is going on with your car, this is reflecting what's going on in you. Because you're not separate from your environment. I mean, you might be physically appear to be separate, but your energy is impacting everything in your environment. And most people miss that.
Yes, I know. Or it gets written off as really woo-woo, because it's like the brain can't wrap around how big we really are and how interconnected we really are with everything.
I never thought about that in business. Yeah, I know it's the car. And I'm just thinking, I use sacred geometry. If I have a problem with my computer or something, I'll use a sacred geometry. I'll run Tibetan 8 over whatever it is. I stopped the car from overheating. I was on my way to get on a cruise, and we were in stop traffic and the car was overheating. I thought, Lord, if the car breaks down, I'm not going to make it. So I started doing Tibetan 8s, and the car cooled down and everything was fine. And I got there. It's like somebody looking from the house. I must have thought, what the heck are you doing? And people have always thought I'm weird. So it doesn't bother me at all.
Oh, I love that story. It's funny how perceptions, based on our conditioning and what we've been taught about the world, some people's way of operating just can seem so foreign. And to others, it's just so natural that you would call upon the sacred geometry. And to others, they wouldn't even know what you're talking about. There's so many different frames.
Yeah, and I was also thinking in terms of athletes and the athletes who would cross themselves like before they go up to bat. I remember I'm an ordained metaphysical minister, and I remember in my studies how that actual motion, the order that you're doing it in, is very much like a Tibetan 8. So that's the other thing that's very powerful to me is Carolyn Mace calls them truths with a capital T. In other words, they're going across all cultures. And that's one of the things going across cultures.
Yeah. Some of these symbols, I have noticed that too. There are certain spiritual practices that athletes will be doing with their body in certain ways, like you just described, that, if they knew logically, they might all kind of joke and laugh about it and write it off. But really there's a way that gets woven in the fabric, and whether our mind accepts it for what it is or not, there's a continuity.
I want to keep going on this track, but I want to just take a quick sponsor break. Affirmations work 100% of the time. If yours do not produce your desired results, then it is time to discover what others do not tell you about how and what to say. And the secret no one shares that leaves you thinking affirmations do not work for you. head over to letsgetmetaphysicalpodcast.com/affirmations for my special offer, Allie, on goals and affirmations. The link is in the show notes. So talking about the energy and what we see, and when it doesn't matter that we're working differently with people, because energy is energy. As you said, we're all connected, and you have to get into, as you said, tapping into the wisdom that lives within you, that you drive straight to the root of things as quickly as possible, into the depths of what wants to be revealed, healed, and integrated. And you don't go there unless spirit is saying, yes, this person's ready for that. When I do energetic work on people, I'm talking directly to the spirit. So there's no conscious mind getting in the way. And sometimes information flows in, and I'll just let them know, okay, so some information flew in, and I call it adding to a circuit, but they didn't need to know the details. And then other times the information comes in details going all the way back to when they were in the womb. And in one case, they came into the lifetime with it, and the entire history. And this is what fascinates me. There's the history of, and this all relationship disconnects, of when you count down from their current age into conception. And when you then, it's like peeling an onion, certain things show up, but then when you're coming back up, different things show up, and it all goes into the same circuit. But nothing comes up that the person is not ready to handle in detail. And that's, how does that manifest in what you do with people?
Well, first off, I'm in alignment with what you're saying. For me, it's the way that manifests is I don't direct people with a lot of advice, or, I mean, I do when I'm doing strategic planning and things like that. I'll, brainstorm, but my role is more to create an environment where I ask questions and people start revealing what's going on. And I often will use the body as an entry point. Like they might be talking about something very difficult, and then they'll start to feel a tightening in their solar plexus or a speeding up in their heart. And then we'll access that area. And it's from there that I often find, sometimes like you just described, spontaneous memories will be revealed. Or I remember one time, it can be very shamanic, because I'm remembering one time I was sitting with an executive and we were on a 2-day retreat together, and we were doing some visioning work, and we had, things all over the walls, and we were really in our heads, and I felt it. And I said, we have to stop for a second, and we have to drop in a different way, because the reason that we're struggling is because we're not getting out of our conception of reality and accessing more information from somewhere that is like unknown. So we did that, and I asked him to close his eyes. And to your point, I think what revealed itself next shocked him. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But what was so beautiful about it is that he was in enough of a surrendered place, kind of in his own feminine energy of just surrendering and patient and listening. His eyes were closed. We were just going on a journey on, the vision for the business. But then all of a sudden he started seeing, and this is someone who doesn't do this kind of practice. So at first he was like, what's going on? But he literally started seeing through the eyes of an eagle. And it was as if he was the eagle. And so we were just tapping into, like, what is this aspect of intelligence that's trying to give you information right now? What is it saying? And we were both in tears, because what the eagle brought through was actually more about his role as a father at home. It did a little bit about the business too. I mean, they're all linked, but it was so beautiful because he was willing to not know for 10 minutes and just let me ask him to close his eyes. And I followed his guidance, really, of what he was noticing. And so to your point, I think that material comes up when there's enough safety to not be kind of yielding perceptions of like, this isn't cool, this is weird, I'm supposed to figure this out, or panic that we've got to come up with these ideas, we don't have time to stop. That will happen a lot in a corporate environment. But things reveal themselves, to your point, that we can handle, and nothing more than that. At least that's been my journey, is that this person was ready to have his framework around conceptual reality shifted. And so the ego he became aware of the energy of the ego because he was open to something new.
It's so extraordinary. And I'm listening to that experience, and I'm wondering how often in the corporate world, if people could do what you just talked about doing with that executive, if things would actually get simplified and they could accomplish their task so much faster on a different level, be more efficient, if they're willing to let go of, oh, we have to be logical.
Yes, I think there is a direct correlation between the executives that I work with who are cultivating this, I call it the inner game, but are cultivating a quality of presence and listening and tracking their own conditioned minds. Those leaders, they are paving the way for a whole new way of making decisions, creating teams, building environments of safety and trust, and interrupting the cultures of fear, because they're not worried that if they can't figure it out, they're not going to get there. They know that there are other ways the information comes through. And so there is more efficiency. It's just been such a clear thing that I've been witnessing. Yeah. I love seeing you smile right now.
I was married for 32 years to someone who was always telling me, you're not logical, you're talking to me. So I would just sit back and I'd listen to his logic. There was nothing logical about it. So the perception of what is logical versus, well, it's like science. If you can't prove it in science, it's not true. But science changes every so many years. And what didn't used to be true is, and vice versa.
Yeah, thank goodness for quantum theory and neuroscience, because they are expanding this network of wholeness that we're talking about, that there is something much larger that's scientifically proven.
I'm just kind of jumping off someplace really different. If it's okay with you.
Absolutely.
The person who transitioned last week at the age of 31, his mom didn't know what to do. So she asked me to intercede, to talk to his spirit, to find out what he wanted in terms of donating his organs. And
so this young man had died, you said earlier.
He was brain dead, but mom didn't want to turn off the machine.
Got it.
She was looking for a miracle, which who wouldn't, if it was your kid. And I actually had trouble accessing him. At first, he didn't want to talk to me, but then he did. And we were able to get the information that she needed. So she knew what to do. And what was really cool was she was then able to get that information for herself. And it was, I just thought that was such a huge gift. And I was feeling so devastated because I was giving everything I had to her to take care of the family. And he came to me 2 days after he'd been pronounced dead and brain dead. He came to me and his spirit filled my room. And I said, is that you, Michael? And I don't hear voices. I can see energy, but I didn't see his energy, but I got a very clear yes. And I felt all the love. I knew he was at peace. And then he was gone. But I was able to share that with his mom. And I have had experiences like I got to my mom just a moment after she had left her body. And I have a cat. He was just wearing a cat suit. He was my best friend in the world. And he still continues to be my spirit guide. And we are all one. We're all connected. And just because somebody else goes to a different plane doesn't mean we're not still connected.
Yeah. So beautiful that you were able to actually, two things I love about your story. One is that you were wanting so much to access Michael, and for some reason the timing wasn't quite right, and then it allowed his mother to access him. So that's another thing about the readiness that we were talking about earlier, that readiness within ourselves of when is something ready to be revealed, or when is it ready, you know, in relationship of who's supposed to get the information first, potentially. And just the fact that we are so connected, and it can be really hard to get that when we're in these physical bodies and when we have certain kinds of conditioning. It just is. I remember when my brother died, I was 13 years old and he was 17. It was probably still to this day the most devastating experience of my life, because not only did he abruptly leave, it was a car accident, but he also was my primary protector and the person on a level that we're talking about that really got me, even though, you know, we fought and we did what siblings do. It was like he was my tribe and the only one that I really felt that way with. And when he died, there was a sense that I would never see him again. And that's what was told to me. It's like, oh, he's up in heaven somewhere with so-and-so, but I didn't have access to that. And all I saw was he went into the ground. And so these ways that we build as young children based on what we learn, like what's accessible and what's not, what's reality and what's not. And the gift of the work that you're doing in these conversations in the world about what does it mean to feel our oneness? You know, what does that mean? What would the world look like if we were actually had presidents in office that were really, truly considering what's happening to the whole, and that we had discussions around the structures and the power structures and the money train that forces presidents or whomever to make decisions that aren't really on behalf of the whole because they feel forced to. You know, all these power dynamics that make it almost imperceptible to recognize the wholeness.
You talk about the difference between power over and power with.
Yeah, this is a passion of mine.
Yeah.
Power over is the experience of being driven by fear. There's a way in which I'm not going to be able to get my needs met, so I'm going to be doing whatever possible. So there's coercion, there's dominance, there's greed, there's scarcity. There's a sense of we've got to pool all these resources for us. There's a sense of it's a self-preservation. Like I think of it as a very much of a primal fear-based leadership model. It's a lot of what wars have been based on. It's, you know, it's us against them. It's somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. Who can get more power is the one who wins. So power with is the journey of integrating head, heart, body, and recognizing that when we are taking an action, we are impacting everything around us. So corporations, I work with some wealth management firms, and I know some of them do not invest in any of the oil industry, and some of them do. And there's a way in which the ones that don't are choosing not to intentionally because they know that fossil fuel is the cause of so much destruction on the planet, and they don't want to participate in that and have that be part of their legacy. So the power with is more of like a collaborative, recognizing that the choices I make do impact the whole. And when am I doing it out of self-serving, and when am I doing it out of my conditioning, essentially? And when am I doing it from a place of accessing what's best for the whole? So it's not, some people can mistake it, and I understand this completely, that power with is about conceding and always having mutual consent. And, you know, we're humans. We're always going to have differences, and there's always going to be polarities as long as we're in our separate self. But it's more about having transparent conversations about those things and having honest investigations of why we want things, why people, different camps in an organization want things done a different way, and what are they trying to solve for? What are the fears behind them? So it's really understanding how the system works as opposed to just always collaborating. I don't know, does that make sense, the distinction?
It totally makes sense. And I'm so grateful that you work with companies, that you work with executives, because that's something I wouldn't begin to know how to do. And thank goodness you do.
Well, I want to say go ahead. Well, I just want to say, thank goodness there's executives out there that are willing to have these conversations, because I wouldn't stay doing the work if I didn't feel that there were these courageous leaders that are exploring their own awakening and do want to challenge themselves in their own conditioning and their own reactivity so that they aren't operating through power over.
How do they find you? How do they even know to look for you?
You know, it's funny. I've never advertised my consulting business. It's all been referral. I do have a website called Revealing Wisdom that's for my corporate work, but it's all been through word of mouth. Yeah. I would say the trickiest part for me in my profession is when I want to collapse and make myself smaller because I know that it will create a division between me and the clients. Like if they don't understand the kind of things we're talking about, like that's where I have given my power away in the past, where I'm scared of being perceived as woo-woo. So I hold back. And I've certainly come such a long way. Now I do talk, I teach neuroscience, fortunately, has been a gateway for me to be able to talk about everything we're talking about from a very scientific, you know, logical position. So, but the reason I just jumped back in is I just feel so grateful for the people who are willing to have these conversations in the corporate world and change their cultures.
That totally makes sense, because you're always going to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, right.
If you allow yourself to follow, the universe talks to us constantly. Our guides, our angels, the universe, our higher self, our spirit, constantly, it's nonstop. You just need to learn to tune in to recognize the messages. So, of course, it makes sense.
And you know what I would add to that is that, and I will speak, this was my experience for a long time until I had those coaches say, you need to get more in your body, is that I didn't recognize those voices because I kept myself so busy and I kept myself so filled with activity that rest didn't even seem like an option. It was before I started meditating. I mean, this was like 30 years ago. But when I see executives who actually see the power of pausing and meditating, I give some clients, I offer them the suggestion to do Headspace. It's an app, a meditation app. It's a very simple app, but anything to get them started, because that's when they start recognizing that there is other input of energy and thoughts and guidance that are coming through. And then comes the part that you're talking about, which is then how do you start discerning what you want to take action on when that information's coming through? And how do you trust yourself?
That's such great information, because I strongly believe if everybody could meditate, or I spend hours every day and meditate. I do blessings. I do a lot of spiritual work, but I live alone. You know, my kids are all grown. I've got grandchildren who don't live here. I can do that. But I started doing that when I was a stay-at-home mom. So I believe it makes a huge difference, because it keeps us more in our body, more in who we are. And well, I do Qigong also. So just to be able, thank you. I want to include that app in my show notes.
Yeah, in the show notes, Headspace. Yeah.
So what is the best way for people to reach you? And I highly want everybody out there listening, you want to be sure to go to Anne Marie's website and take her quiz. I was a psychotherapist. I worked with the psychological quizzes, and I'll tell you, this is actually powerful. In my opinion, it's accurate and can make a really big difference for you. So send them to your website, which this will all be in the show notes.
Yeah, that's the best way.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you. Is there any one message that you want to leave with everybody today?
The only thing I would say is I just wish for all of us in some level to have a taste of the love that we were talking about earlier, you know, through our own ability to be compassionate towards our human selves, because being human is so complex and it's filled with so many paradoxes and so many double binds. And so my wish, really more than a message, is just to slow down and feel yourself, to find ways to notice nature, to be able to access the mirror of our own stillness through the natural world, through friends who can really listen deeply, through our own meditation practice, but just to slow down and recognize the beauty and the gifts of the natural world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for
Wonderful
being here.
to be with
Thank
you.
you for the work that you do, for making such a difference in the lives and the planet, because we live on a planet, the planet responds to us. Yeah. I want to remind everybody to go on over to our Facebook group, share your experiences, make a new friend, ask your questions, and also to our podcast page. All of these links are in the show notes, and I will see you here next week.
You've been listening to a talk on the wilder side. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Get Metaphysical. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode, and while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every Monday for more exciting insights and wisdom on life beyond your five senses. Until next time, take a small step in a new direction. Start now.